Her name is Mahahila.
Let me start by saying that's not actually my name. My name is pronounced Mahahilal. Can anyone say Maha? Okay, we won't do that again. So the various versions I get of my name are Maya, Maja, Mihi, Mama. And when I was in middle school, there was this really strange kid that liked to harass me. He would literally say my name. And I was just like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'll just drop out of life. So most of my experience in life has been shaped by the fact that I'm Muslim and Arab. And so I get a lot of stupid questions on an almost daily basis, right? One of the questions I think one of the other comics also mentioned is, where are you from? Okay? So I get this question a lot because obviously people can't believe that someone like me would be American. Sometimes I can't believe it either. So sometimes I tell people that I'm from a country called Abudim. Has anyone heard of Abudim?
No. Totally.
Really? It doesn't exist. It's not a country that exists. It's a fake country. So I don't know where you heard of it from, but it's fake. The question I get, as someone else mentioned, is why do you speak English so well? I'm like, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to ask you, why don't you speak English better? Don't worry about me. Then my mom her and my dad immigrated from Egypt and came to the U.S. to do their PhDs in engineering. But my mom has an Arab accent, and so a lot of times people ask her, why do you speak English so well, or, do you understand what I'm saying? And her response is always like, yes, I do, I have a PhD, do you? And they're like, no. And if that's not sufficient, then she goes on to tell them that not only does she have a PhD, both her daughters have PhDs, and so does her son-in-law. Literally, the only person in our family that does not have a PhD is 3. 3 years old. Okay? We think that's a pretty good reason not to have a PhD. So today, the Comcast guy came over to fix my internet, and my mom has like this Arabic TV box so she can watch, all these different Arabic channels. And she asked the guy, do you know what language this is? And he said, no, and she said, it's Arabic. And he's like, oh, are you from Arabia? And I was like, wow, I thought that country died a long time ago. Like, I thought we were done talking about this fake country called Arabia. But that's cool. But that also explains why the U.S. is dropping bombs on countries left and right in the Arab world, because they can't find Arabia because it doesn't exist. Finally, things make sense. Okay. So another thing I think is funny when you're talking about who knows English and who doesn't know English is, my mom wrote her PhD dissertation on engineering in English. Yet she's the one who gets asked, how come she speaks English so well? How did you manage to do this? And then when an American goes overseas, they literally say one word properly in Arabic, and the whole country throws a party.
Yep.
Right? You say marhaba, which means hello, and everyone's like really excited. But meanwhile, people like my mom have to write a whole fucking dissertation in engineering in English, and that's not enough. So that's great. So when it comes to this other question again, where are you from? Sometimes I'll tell people I'm from Egypt, and they're like, oh, I know someone from Yemen. And I'm like, there's really no connection. And I'm like, where are you from? And they're like, I'm from Minnesota. And I'm like, oh, cool, I know someone from South Carolina. I'm like, why should I be the only one trying to figure out what the politics here? So, what I also love about white people in particular is when they tell me to go back to my country. And I'm like, this is not your country either, let's go to the airport together. Both leave because we both don't belong. And then I had this former boss who really talked a lot and most of the time made things worse for everyone. But she was at a protest wearing a shirt that says, "We will not be silent." And I think that was supposed to provide us with some sort of comfort, but in reality it actually made me really anxious. And I'm like, actually, if we stay quiet, things would be much better. So I decided to make her a shirt that says, "I will be silent and you're welcome." That would make people like me feel a little bit more comfortable. A couple of weeks ago, I was at this Color of Surveillance conference, and it was along the lines of like social justice, racial justice in the context of surveillance. And one of the speakers was a Muslim person who was in the military, but yet was spied on by the NYPD. First of all, I took a minute to laugh about that. Because I feel like if you're working in an institution of state violence, you should kind of have the guarantee of not being surveilled by another institution of state violence. But apparently he didn't have that luxury. But the best part was he was wearing an American tie during the panel. And I was just, honestly, I was just getting really excited about the possibility of him being recorded in that tie. It would come full circle. Maybe then you would understand the irony. Because it happens, you know, it happens. So has everyone heard of the program here called DACA that Trump has been trying to attack left and right? Right? So it stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, right? But there's another DACA program that most people haven't heard of, and it actually stands for Deferred Action for Colonial Arrivals. And that program is much older, okay? It's hundreds of years. So what I want the people who benefit from that DACA program to do is to advocate for the other people that are on the DACA program, right? Because you know how it feels to be able to stay in the country, right, for 500 or 600 years, right? So remember that when you're thinking about DACA. There's two DACAs, right? So just know that. So I'm a very political person, as you can tell. And so if you haven't heard, the TSA recently decided to start this program called Quiet Skies to surveil passengers looking for criminal behaviors. The behaviors they're looking for include excessive fidgeting, excessive perspiration, rapid eye blinking, rubbing hands, appearance different than information provided, and the person slept during the flight. Very, very specific and weird. But I honestly think that that list is not inclusive enough, and we should actually be adding a lot more things to this list. So I sent them a letter to include some other indicators such as standing, breathing, bending down, stretching, coughing, sneezing, walking, chewing more than 10 bites per minute, reclining the plane chair, and failing to recognize how empirically sound the TSA's research on criminal behavior is. I should also add that my list also applies to particularly white women calling the police on black people for doing it. So the last thing I'm going to say is, I was doing this presentation on Islamophobia a couple weeks ago, and I do this a lot because that's the work that I do. And after the presentation, this woman who studies architecture and had been to the Arab world was telling me how beautiful Islamic architecture was, and she said, could we use this to kind of dispel some of the ideas that people have about Muslims? And I was like, okay, sure. I don't know any architects, but sure. And then she said that mosques are so mysterious. And I just looked at her and I'm like, what is mysterious about a mosque? There's nothing mysterious. It's just different. It's not mysterious. You went inside, there was no dead children in the corner. The coffins in the basement. Like, there was nothing mysterious about it. But then again, that also explains why the U.S. keeps bombing them, because apparently they're mysterious, even though they've been seen them, nothing happens to them. But that's cool. So I will just end with that. Thank you, guys.
That was nice. Hear it from the high. All right, good. Thank you.